I hope you are having a great week. Tomorrow is Friday. It's been quite a week so far. We've got lots of news to cover today. We're going to be opening with the latest from the White House, and then we have 8 stories that we have curated for you. And now let's get into the White House report. Good evening. I'm Gary Franchi, Next News Network Chief White House Correspondent, delivering the latest White House news from the past 24 hours in partnership with our streaming partner, Trump Daily Post. Tonight, the focus is the Trump administration's economic and national security message direct from the White House. Alongside President Trump's schedule in Washington, Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to Colorado for the United States Air Force Academy commencement that happened earlier. And according to the daily guidance, President Trump's Thursday schedule included executive time at 8 a.m., a pre-taped interview at 10 a.m., no word yet on who he was interviewing with, and then, of course, signing time in the Oval Office at 2, the policy meeting in the Oval at 3:30. The guidance also set a 2 p.m. on-camera briefing in the James S. Brady briefing room with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, making that appearance the administration's central public-facing event of the day. Now, from the in-town pool report, there were no public events on the president's schedule this morning under sunny skies at the White House, with attention centered on that afternoon Treasury briefing. The White House said that Secretary Bessent would provide updates from the Treasury Department, putting the administration's economic message front and center for the day. And the pool later reported lunch lid in effect until 1 p.m., a routine pause in official media activity ahead of the afternoon schedule that simply kept the focus on the White House briefing window and the president's closed-door work in the Oval Office. The other major development from the in-town pool was confirmation from U.S. sources that a tentative agreement had been reached in the ongoing negotiations with Iran, subject to approval by President Trump. No details were released in the pool report, but the key point from the White House orbit is clear. The matter is now before the president. And at the podium, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he delivered what amounts to be a broad Trump administration readout on the economy and national security. The consumer-facing headline was Trump Accounts, which Bessent described as the most important benefit for young people since the GI Bill. He said the app is now live on major platforms. Nearly 6 million children have already signed up. The program is set to officially launch on July 4th. Treasury's mechanism is straightforward. Children born during President Trump's administration receive a $1,000 seed investment paired with online learning pods designed to build financial literacy and help create what the administration calls a new generation of shareholders. Bessent also stacked a series of upbeat indicators for American families and savers. He said the average tax refund is running near $3,300, up 11%. 62 million returns, or 44% claimed at least one signature tax cut. Real GDP is up 2.6% over 4 quarters. And the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now estimate for the second quarter is 3.8%. The average 401k is up nearly $30,000. And Trump's prescription drug savings have topped $600 million, and unemployment currently stands at 4.3%. The administration's message was unmistakable. Under President Trump, the economy is producing results that reach households directly. And on energy and Iran, Bessent said oil prices were down about 10% in May. The market is well supplied, and gasoline prices should follow once supply clears through the system. He also repeated 3 red lines in dealing with Iran. Tehran must turn over highly enriched uranium, abandon their nuclear program, and keep the Strait of Hormuz open. On legal matters involving the DOJ Anti-Weaponization Fund and an IRS settlement issue, he limited comment because of ongoing litigation, while stating plainly that no American should be targeted for political reasons and referring legal questions to DOJ and the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He also touched several other points quickly. No central bank digital currency, or CBDC as we call them. The Treasury is also preparing in case Congress advances a $250 bill. That's legislation while pledging to follow the law. That bill would feature President Trump. Sanctions pressure does remain in view on Russian oil, and the administration says the Antifa funding investigation is still active. And away from Washington, Vice President J.D. Vance's day began in Colorado Springs, where the pool reported his motorcade rolling from the overnight location at 8:32 this morning, local time, for the Air Force Academy graduation. The weather there was gray and rainy, and the Vice President was scheduled to deliver his remarks at Falcon Stadium during the 9 a.m. commencement. And the Vice President's motorcade arrived at Falcon Stadium at about 8:37 a.m. with the pool stage near the field waiting his appearance. The White House official guiding the pool expected Vance to enter around 9:10 ahead of the graduating class and remarks from the Academy and Air Force leadership. The pool then reported that Vice President Vance's commencement remarks were underway 9:45, delivered from the dais at midfield before the class of 2026. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who traveled with the Vice President, was seated in the front row of the VIP section. Vance wrapped his address at 10:14. The pool noted several key themes. He stressed the need for American air and space power to adapt to new threats. They're tied to that mission and President Trump's commitment to stopping Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Highlighted the president's backing for the F-47 and the Golden Dome programs and for increased defense spending. He praised the rescue of the downed U.S. pilots in Iran and warned that even in the age of artificial intelligence, life and death decisions must remain in human hands. The overnight setup for that trip came after Air Force Two landed in Colorado Springs at 8:59 p.m. local Wednesday in cool temperatures and light rain. The Vice President and the Second Lady, they deplaned last night, 9:15, entering the motorcade and rolled out at 9:17. Now, the Vice President arrived at his overnight location last night, 9:58 p.m., ending his official activities for that evening. And earlier on Wednesday, the White House had advised that Vice President Vance was traveling to Colorado to stay overnight in the Colorado Springs area to deliver that commencement address at the United States Air Force Academy. That happened this morning. The initial pool notice established that the purpose of the trip and the departure from Joint Base Andrews. The follow-up pool reported showed Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance arriving at the Joint Base around 7:24 p.m. That was aboard Marine 2, crossing the tarmac, boarding Air Force 2 at 7:29 p.m. And the Vice President, he waved to the press, didn't take any questions. Energy Secretary Chris Wright also joined that flight west. Now, so taken together, the past 24 hours show a White House focused on economic delivery, national security decision-making, and visible engagement with the next generation of American service members. President Trump's team projected confidence on growth and energy and kept Iran decisions at the presidential level and put Vice President Vance before future Air Force officers with a clear America First message on strength and readiness. And with that, the White House update is complete. We'll turn now to the rest of the top stories shaping the day across the country and the world. So we welcome you guys to the program this evening. We can see everybody filing in the chat room. Great to have you here. We've got lots of news to jump on today. We're going to get started first with what happened in the press briefing room. As you know, the press secretary is out on maternity leave, and they are going through a rotating cast of characters from the cabinet who will be filling her shoes at that podium. And today it was the Treasury Secretary Bessent. Previous to that, it was Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. So we're not quite sure who will be the next one in line. But since they are picking from the cabinet, it's really anyone's guess. So let's jump right into our first story of the evening and get this news out of the gate. Okay. I'm waiting for the timer, Brian. Tonight, the media want you staring at an app download, but that's not the real story. The real story is that President Trump may be building the first large-scale wealth creation program for American children in generations. And almost nobody in the corporate press wants to admit just how big this could become. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just called the economy resilience and prosperity. He said it's never been a better time to be an American, and revealed that nearly 6 million kids are already signed up for Trump accounts. 6 million before the full July 4th launch. So ask yourself, is this just a program rollout or the beginning of a new era in America? You see, this matters because President Trump's doing something Republicans have talked about for years, but Washington rarely delivers, shifting the national conversation away from dependency and towards ownership. Not handouts, not another bloated entitlement, not another feel-good slogan from the left. This is savings, investing, tax-deferred growth, and a direct stake in America's future for the next generation. According to the Treasury, parents will be able to manage these accounts through that new app, contribute up to $5,000 a year, and for children born from 2025 through 2028, the government adds $1,000 to help them get started. And that's not welfare politics, that's pro-family wealth building. And look at the timing. As America marks its 250th year, the Trump administration's pairing a booming economy, lower expected energy costs, and long-term savings for children into one message: stop the theft, lower the burden, build wealth, and no wonder Democrats are going to panic if this catches fire. And while we're talking about securing America's future, there's another breaking story that Americans need to see right now. This breaking news on America's critical mineral supply chain, the SAGA metal story, just got stronger. Less than 48 hours ago, SAGA released new information suggesting its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the planet. SAGA Metals is trading as SAGMF in the United States and SAGA in Canada. And to understand the scale, you need to compare radar to China's Panzinhua deposit. Now, that's a state-linked system. It's valued in the multi-billion-dollar range and responsible for over 40% of global vanadium supply. So SAGA sits right in the center to compete with China, and that makes this a national security story, not just a mining headline. If America's serious about supply chain independence, projects like this matter. Check out the in-depth interview with the CEO I did on this topic just a few weekends ago, and check the exclusive briefing that is linked below, but it's only for Next News viewers. Now back to the Trump policy story that the legacy media are badly underplaying. See, here's the twist they don't want to discuss. Secretary Bessent didn't roll this out as some niche family perk. He compared Trump accounts to the GI Bill in terms of importance for young Americans. So think about that. He's talking about scale, reach, and long-term national impact. Then add the headline number, nearly 6 million children already signed up before the official July 4th go live. And suddenly, it's not just an app story, it is a mass enrollment ownership story. And that's exactly why we're going to pull up the tweets and show you what the administration is signaling in plain sight. So we have this. This is from the cabinet meeting. The secretary giving an update that the economy is booming with two words.
Resilience and prosperity. The continued resilience of the economy speaks for itself, even during the Iran conflict, and it speaks to the strength of your leadership. Pro-growth policies are creating conditions for American families and businesses to prosper. We're entering the second half of our 250th anniversary year with renewed optimism and momentum. It has never been a better time to be an American, and as you said earlier, we have a record number of Americans working. The economy that you are building is not only strong, but secure and resilient and better positioned to compete globally. Real GDP has risen 2.7% over the past 4 quarters, something that many economists said couldn't be done. In the first quarter of 2026, despite the Iran conflict, GDP grew at a 2% annual rate. The Atlanta Fed GDP now is predicting 4.3% for this quarter. In terms of prices, I believe the prices are transitory. Oil will be lower than pre-conflict levels when this ends. Natural gas is already down, as you mentioned. Drug and pharmaceutical prices, they are plummeting, and rent is down. We are more resilient to energy price fluctuations due to your energy dominance agenda, to regulatory efforts, and we have never sold so much energy to the rest of the world.
So that was from yesterday's cabinet meeting. And now we're going to check in on this mobile app for the Trump accounts officially launching today.
Mobile app for Trump accounts will officially launch today. It will be available in both Apple and Google app stores. Nearly 6 million families, have already signed up for the program, which will provide tax advantage saving accounts for children. The accounts are set to officially go live on July 4th, the 4th of July, Independence Day. Families who haven't yet enrolled can still do so at trumpaccounts.gov. Babies getting the big bucks, Todd. Who doesn't like that?
I love it.
trumpaccounts.gov. That was the launch announcement. Now here's the practical place for parents. Rapid Response 47 breaks down how the app works. The tax-deferred set up the $1,000 government contribution for eligible babies.
Happening today, an app for parents that will allow them to manage Trump accounts for their children will be available for download. The accounts will go live on the 4th of July. So far, the U.S. Treasury says 6 million kids are signed up for the savings accounts that offer tax-deferred growth, similar to an IRA. Parents can contribute up to $5,000 a year, and for kids born between 2025 through 2028, the government will contribute an extra $1,000.
Not a bad deal. So the sign-up pushes on. The numbers keep climbing. Here's the White House putting its stamp on the official launch app. It's here. The Trump Accounts app has launched. Now every family has a simple, direct way to get involved and build their child's future. Download it today on any app store and make sure your kids are ready for the massive July 4th official launch. So this is directly from the White House account. The Trump Accounts app is now live. Sign up on the app stores nationwide. Sign up, invest, and monitor. Quite remarkable technology that the White House is rolling out. So it's here. And now we have this from the press briefing room today, where the Treasury Secretary highlighted the Trump account program.
So let's start out with Trump accounts. Trump accounts, I believe, are the most important benefit for young people since the GI Bill. Today, the app is now available on all major platforms, bringing the president's vision directly to American homes. Nearly 6 million American children have been signed up for Trump accounts, which will launch on July 4th. And I would encourage all of you to go to trumpaccount.gov to sign up. We had a historic tax filing season. We passed the largest tax cuts in American history.
So the Trump accounts are now live. Big news. So what this really means is very simple. The Trump administration is building an economic identity around American strength at every level. Bessent says GDP has risen 2.7% over the past 4 quarters despite conflict abroad. With the Atlanta Fed GDP now tracking 4.3% for this quarter, he says prices are transitory and energy costs should ease. Pair that with the historic tax cuts, a record number of Americans working, and now millions of children entering tax advantage savings accounts, and you can see the architecture. It's not random. It is a coherent America First formula: stronger growth, lower pressure on families, and ownership for the next generation. Democrats build careers promising dependence, and Trump is offering families a stake, and this is why this could become one of the most defining domestic victories of his second term. So the bottom line is this. The app's not a headline. The headline is that President Trump's trying to create millions of young Americans with a financial stake in this country's future. While his administration keeps pushing growth, energy relief, tax cuts, and prosperity at the same time, that is how you build a durable majority, and that's how you change a culture, and that's how you leave the failed ideas of the previous administration in the rearview mirror. The left will attack this. They'll sneer at the branding, question the funding, and pretend ownership is somehow dangerous when Trump is the one putting families first. But the American people can see what this is. Pro-family, pro-growth, pro-America. So if you think every parent in America should know about Trump accounts before July 4th, share this report right now. Subscribe to the channel and drop your answer below. Do you support giving American children a real ownership stake in their future? Yes or no? Make sure you text the words raw feed to 844-840-4963. That's how you get on our secret text message alert system. And check out the merch shelf down below and celebrate America 250 with us. All right. So those Trump accounts are pretty cool. I'm excited for them. Still need to get mine enrolled. Certainly will be a huge benefit for my children. I'm sure you guys are talking to your family about it as well. So yeah, about those notifications, not sure exactly why they're not going out, but that's why we set up this telephone number here so that you can be kept informed. Now, we don't send out alerts when the show does go live, but we do send them out when the news drops once every evening at 8:45 Central Time. Okay, Brian, let's move into our next story. We got to talk about this new $250 bill. This is exciting. For the first time in American history, there's talk of putting a living president on our U.S. currency. No doubt these will serve, if it goes through Congress and it's approved, these will be collector's items for generations. So what would you do with a $250 bill? Would you save it or spend it? I'll bet you a bunch of leftists are going to be burning them. All right, well, let's just continue here with this story. Tonight, Democrats are losing their minds over a question, and that tells you everything about where this country is headed. Should President Trump appear on a new $250 bill for America's 250th birthday? Well, what set them off was not some secret decree, not some executive order, but a simple reality check from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that legislation is already sitting before the House and the Senate. And the second that possibility hit the public square, the media machine went into panic. Why? Because this is not really about a bill. It's about symbolism, power, and who gets to represent America. Now, why does it matter? Well, it matters far beyond a piece of paper in your wallet. America is heading into its 250th anniversary, and the Trump administration is building that celebration around patriotism, national pride, historic memory, and a full-throated America First revival. So when the possibility of a Trump $250 bill enters the conversation, the left hears one thing, and Trump supporters hear another. The left hears a threat to their cultural control. The base here's a tribute to the man who fought the establishment, came back, and is now leading the country through its rebirth moment. Scott Bessent laid it out clear that current law says no living person can appear on U.S. currency, and the note must say, "In God we trust." He said proposed legislation exists to change that requirement. In other words, this is not some rogue fantasy. It's a live political question, and the media reaction has exposed the real issue. They're terrified that Trump has become something larger than a normal president in the minds of millions of Americans. And while the media spends all day obsessing over symbols, a lot of Americans are focused on something more important, actually feeling better and living stronger. You've probably seen the clip of Joe Rogan talking with Mel Gibson about people close to them facing serious health struggles, then seeing dramatic turnarounds through light-based therapies. Rogan talks about how it works at the cellular level. Gibson says that plainly the stuff works, and that caught my attention. In my own life, I saw something similar when my wife dealt with constant discomfort and anxiety. That's why I want you to check out Red Light Therapy from Jonathan Otto at myredlight.com. These devices are designed to support recovery, energy, skin health, and overall wellness in a simple way you can use at home. If you want to try it for yourself, go to myredlight.com, use NNN25 for individual items or NNN30 for bundles. Now back to a story that has the ruling class absolutely unraveling, because here's the twist the legacy press doesn't want to admit. Scott Bessent did not validate their hysteria, he mocked it. In the White House briefing room, he torched the Washington Post article as terribly written and terribly edited, then boiled their entire scoop down to one embarrassing point. Treasury is following the law and preparing in advance, just like any competent department should. See, that changes everything, because now the story is no longer did Trump break the rules. The story is why did the media rush to manufacture a scandal out of basic planning tied to legislation already on Capitol Hill. So here is a shot of what that new bill will look like. What do you think about the Trump $250 bill? Look at that thing. That's a large-scale mock-up that could soon be gracing your wallets. A $250 bill. So that question's firing out of the base. Now watch Scott Bessent walk into the briefing room and torch the Washington Post for its hit piece on the Trump bill.
struggling to
again,
afford gas and
you know,
groceries.
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yep. Terribly written, terribly edited, because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law and that we've created the bill and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to... I didn't really understand what the story was.
So,
but anyway...
appointees aren't involved in that, 2 of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed. Just like we were ready 6 months in advance with a one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. So we have to prepare in advance. You can't draw something up the day before.
Politically, do you think it's a good idea, though, when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
Look, I think it has. I think that it's bifurcated. That do you think we should have a 250th anniversary, the celebration?
Well, that's happening anyway, but putting the president's face on a $250 bill is a choice.
But Caitlin, it's not happening anyway. It's happening because it's being funded by private citizens, by the federal government, by state governments, by municipal governments to celebrate our country. And I don't think that there's anything untoward about having the President of the United States, the person who was President of the United States, on the 250th anniversary bill.
Oh, but people are struggling to buy groceries and you're focusing on a new bill. That's Caitlin Collins. But he swatted down the media spin. Next, he lays out the actual rule on U.S. currency and makes clear the fight is sitting in Congress. Listen.
Trump's face on a $250 bill.
Well, again, as Treasury Secretary, I have 2 mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on the $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of the, it's all up on Capitol Hill. So at Treasury, we prepare things in advance, so we have prepared
a $250 bill. So it is now on Capitol Hill. The bigger picture reports say the Trump 250 bill push is quietly gaining steam as America heads towards the 250th birthday. According to reports, Trump's Treasury appointees are pushing for this new 250 note featuring his portrait timed for America's 250th anniversary in 2026. It's connected to the stalled Donald J. Trump 250 Bill Act in Congress. Supporters call it a bold tribute. Critics argue it breaks long-standing tradition against featuring living presidents on currency. Here's President Trump, a little AI-generated moment. Yeah, there I am, $250. How cool would that be? Now, wouldn't that just be something else? I would love to see it. So what started as buzz is now becoming a real debate. The left goes into full panic with Charlie Skies calling the idea illegal and attacking Trump personally.
The administration is now looking to celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary with a new $250 bill, but not just any bill, one with President Trump's face on the front of it. 4 current and former officials tell the Washington Post that administration officials are pressuring the Bureau of Engraving to break 150 years of tradition and put a living person on U.S. currency. Charlie Sykes is back with me. So, Charlie, what does it say that this is what the administration, or at least people around it, are focusing on right now?
Well, they're not exactly laser focused on affordability here, are they? This, in many ways, this is kind of the least surprising story of the day, because of course Donald Trump wants his name on currency, despite the tradition, but also despite the law. I mean, there is actually a law on the books that prohibits having any living person's face image on currency. But that seems like a quaint notion.
That's exactly why you introduced legislation to change it. There's nothing wrong with that.
That would stop the Trump administration. But look, whether you're talking about the ballroom,
can I stop you there, because this is important. Sure. One of those folks who works at Treasury told the Trump folks that there are indeed legal obstacles to this. Yes. And then, according to the Washington Post, she told colleagues she was abruptly reassigned. Are there no obstacles to what Trump wants?
Well, and she said in this case, the buck stopped with her, apparently. No, my guess is there will be legal challenges because, since the Thayer Amendment was passed I think it was in the 1860s, this has not been done. There's been a few exceptions, but it's very clearly illegal. But once again, Donald Trump's obsession with servicing his endlessly needy ego, his endless narcissism.
Yeah, it's only illegal until the law is passed. So that's the usual Democrat playbook: cry illegal and scream about ego. Now here's the press corps. This is Peter Doocy just ahead of that press briefing.
You've heard from the Treasury Secretary since this Washington Post story came out this morning that there are officials within the administration who want there to be a new piece of currency, a $250 bill with Scott Bessent's signature right next to a picture of Donald Trump. They would have to change a law that says there can't be U.S. currency with anybody who is still alive. Maybe they are going to do that. We hope to find out. Something else interesting about the format today, it is Scott Bessent because Caroline Leavitt is still on maternity leave. The first two backups for Caroline over the last couple weeks, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, widely believed to have presidential ambitions. Does this mean that we could get Scott Bessent for president 2028? Maybe we'll find that out too.
And so the media chatter, there's some grassroots reaction. Trump bucks coming soon. You're welcome.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me?
So MAGA Nation is having some fun with it, but Democrats are furious. Next, to see just how hard liberals are melting down over the project. Yes, Democrats entering rage mode after learning Trump's face could be placed on the $250 bill. Absolutely epic. Liberals melting down over currency having a president's face.
Dollar bill. But the reason I think there could be a connection, and what I want your take on here, is when there's a headline like this in one of the big national papers, again, what good does this do for a midterm election? If you're a Republican in the House in one of the very few swing districts left, are you like, yay, I'm going to run on the $250 bill?
Or when people are saying $250 is what it costs for me to buy my groceries, and I can't afford that right now.
Cue the meltdowns. But as for me, I will cue the celebration. See, this is the part that matters most. The $250 bill is a vehicle. It's not the destination. The real battle is over whether Trump is merely the current president or the defining political symbol of America's comeback era. Every time his name gets attached to a monument, a meme, a coin, a commemorative idea, or now a possible bill, the left detonates right on cue. And every time they do, they make him even bigger because supporters do not hear elite moralizing about tradition. They hear the same old hatred for the man who refuses to bow to the establishment. So whether this bill becomes law or not, this symbolic victory has already happened. Trump once again forced the country to reveal what it really thinks about America, pride, power, and who actually deserves to embody it. So let's be quite honest. If this were a Democrat icon tied to some progressive pet project, the media would call it historic, inspiring, and overdue, right? Imagine if that was Barack Obama. But because it's Trump, suddenly the same people who trashed American traditions for years pretend to be guardians of sacred norms. Americans can see right through it. Treasury says the law is the law, and Congress has the power to change it. And the public gets to decide whether honoring President Trump during America's 250th birthday feels like a fitting tribute to a once-in-a-generation leader, right? That's called debate, not dictatorship. So here's my question for you. If Congress passed it, would you support a Trump $250 bill? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments and share this report with somebody who's tired of the media meltdown machine. And if you want real America First coverage every single day, make sure you subscribe to our channel right now. But make sure you text that number. Text the words RAW to 844-840-4963. That's how you get direct messages from me to your phone. And you can celebrate America 250 right here with the Next News Network by checking the merch shelf right below this video. Moving right along, we got a lot of news we're going to cover. So we just covered the topic for the Trump accounts, the Trump $250 bill. We got some Iran updates. We got to talk about what happened with Jill Biden. We're going to talk about that new weaponization fund as well. Also, we got some more news on Tulsi Gabbard, as well as developments in the plot to murder Ivanka Trump right from Iran, and more news on the Cuba front that cannot be ignored. So we're going to continue tracking all these stories for you. Right now, we got to figure out exactly what is happening in Iran. Tonight, Iran just tested President Trump's red line, and the Trump administration answered in the only language Tehran understands: strength. While negotiators are still working towards a deal, CENTCOM says Iran launched a ballistic missile towards Kuwait and attacked drones near the Strait of Hormuz. The message from the White House is brutally simple: America will talk, but America will also shoot back. And now Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has revealed the two demands that matter the most. Not 10 demands, not endless weakness, not two, just two: no nukes and open sea lanes. So here's the question: is Trump negotiating a deal or forcing a surrender? You see, this is bigger than another Middle East headline. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important energy choke points on Earth. And if Iran believes it can squeeze the world economy by threatening passage, every family in America pays the price through fuel, shipping, inflation, and instability. President Trump clearly understands that, which is why his team has moved fast with Oman and made freedom of navigation non-negotiable. Bessent said the president wanted to punctuate freedom of navigation in the strait. He reportedly warned that there would be consequences if Oman or its institutions enabled any tolling scheme. And then came Iran's public spin job, claiming that there would be no tolls, only charges for maritime services and environmental protection. Nice try. A tax by another name is still leverage. But here's the real point: the Trump administration is not haggling over details from a position of weakness. It's reducing this negotiation to terms Iran cannot fake. Right? Can't fake its way around. Surrender the highly enriched uranium and keep Hormuz open. That is peace through strength, and Tehran knows it's not on its side. And while we're talking about national power, here is a breaking development on a different front America cannot afford to ignore any longer. This breaking news on America's critical mineral supply chain, the SAGA metal story, just got stronger. Less than 48 hours ago, SAGA released new information suggesting its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the entire planet. Now, SAGA Metals, look at your screen, they trade as SAGMF in the U.S. and SAGA in Canada. But to understand the scale, you need to compare radar to China's Panzinhua deposit. Now, that's a Chinese state-linked system valued in the multi-billion-dollar range. It's also responsible for over 40% of global vanadium. And that is why SAGA is stepping up right now with this to compete. And that's why this matters right now. If America is serious about supply chain security, these are the projects to watch. Check out the in-depth interview with the CEO I did on this topic just a couple of weeks ago, and check the exclusive briefing link below, but it's only for Next News viewers, in the description. Because whether it's sea lanes or strategic minerals, President Trump understands the same truth: America must never be dependent on hostile powers. Now back to the main story, because this is where it gets even more important. See, Iran was not just talking tough. According to CENTCOM, it launched a ballistic missile towards Kuwait and multiple drones near the strait, and U.S. forces responded immediately, taking out the threats before they could do more damage. And that's the part the media always misses. Under President Trump, deterrence is not a press release, it's action. And when you line that up with Bessent's comments and Trump's own warning from the cabinet table, you can see the full doctrine taking shape in real time. So we have this, Iran announcing it will not impose tolls for transit through the strait, but will instead charge fees for maritime services and environmental protection.
And will you be collecting tolls or fees against the passage through the waterway?
There is no toll. به نظرم باید در استخدام کلمات دقت کرد. ما به دنبال
We are not levying any taxes, and we do not wish to collect any tolls. We should emphasize two matters. First, that the measures or moves taken by Iran and Oman are aiming at arriving at a protocol or a dynamic to ensure the safe passage through the waterway. This is a very responsible move, and it is in line with international law as well as the national interest of both our countries and, above all, to the greater good of the international community. And it is quite natural that the services provided through this waterway, including navigation and other movements with respect to safeguarding the environment within the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, all these acts entail certain expenses. However, they cannot be described as tolls or fees.
Yeah, so they're going to use the environmental excuse. Iran tried the word game there. No tolls, just charges with a different label. Now the White House answer was Scott Bessent saying Trump made freedom of navigation in the Strait non-negotiable.
The president wanted to punctuate freedom of navigation in the Strait. I had a call with the Omani ambassador this morning, and he assured me that there were no plans for tolling the Strait. As he said, our countries have had 200 years of good relations. He wants to have another 200 more. And I told him that this was a non-starter, and he did not want to risk either the Omani individuals or Omani financial institutions getting sanctioned.
So Bessent making clear Oman got the message on the sanctions. Next, he raises the pressure on Tehran itself, laying out Trump's red lines on uranium, nukes, and open transit.
Been going back and forth, and President Trump has made it very clear, he talked about it at the cabinet meeting, that he has several red lines. And Iran has to turn over their highly enriched uranium. They cannot pursue a nuclear weapon. And the Strait of Hormuz, back to your question on energy, has to free transit. Navigation of the seas has to be free and open as it was before. So he's not going to take a bad deal. He's going to make a great deal for the American people.
And that's what President Trump does best, making deals, and the red lines are clear. No bomb, no leverage over the Strait, no bad deal. Overnight, CENTCOM says Iran pushed anyway with a ballistic missile towards Kuwait and attack drones near Hormuz. Fox reports that they had Iran carried out an egregious ceasefire violation overnight.
President Trump said a deal with Iran was largely negotiated. Now he says talks aren't quite there yet, but he still says an agreement is within reach.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job. But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes.
Perhaps complicating matters this morning, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says it targeted a U.S. airbase in what CENTCOM calls an egregious ceasefire violation. And CENTCOM says Iran launched a ballistic missile toward Kuwait that was successfully intercepted by Kuwaiti forces. Iran calls it retaliation after U.S. forces shot down 5 Iranian one-way attack drones over the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. says it also hit an Iranian ground control station in Bandar Abbas before it could launch a 6th drone. Both nations are warning of more aggressive action if necessary. President Trump is threatening Iran and Oman if they strike a deal to control the Strait of Hormuz as well. And he's brushing off concerns that he's facing political pressure from the midterms, maintaining Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says they'll see if they can make progress in the coming days.
Now, the president's preference, Mr. President, your preference is told us repeatedly, as always, to negotiate these things and to figure out if you can have agreements. Diplomacy is always the first option. And we continue to work on that through your envoys, Mr. Woodcoff and Kushner and others, the vice president, who've been very involved. And if there's an agreement to be made, we want that to be made.
And regarding Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, the president says he's not comfortable with Russia or China taking it.
So even with Trump still leaving the door open to a deal, Iran kept poking the bear, got hit back fast. Department of War literally telling people that the Patriots are in control. Here is what they posted. Department of War, take a look at this post. Good morning, Patriots. Good morning, Patriots are in control. We are locked in. So continuing here, we have the post capturing the mood. Lindsey Graham says they should change the Nobel Prize to the Trump Prize.
This off. If he can get Saudi Arabia, the center of Islam for the entire world, to recognize the Jewish state Israel, he will have ended the Arab-Israeli conflict that's been going on for thousands of years. They should change the Nobel Prize to the Trump Prize. If he can do that, and I think he can, it's the biggest change in the history, in the modern history, and in the ancient history of the Mideast, where the Arabs and the Jews live together, where it becomes a center of power economically, not a powder keg. And once you put Iran in a box, and he's going to do that, we're going to have peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Nobody thought that was possible. I believe it's possible. And there's one guy can do it, Donald Trump.
So Graham talking big about Trump's ability to force peace through strength, and the battlefield receipts back it up. The Pentagon says U.S. forces took out Iranian drones, and Trump warned Hegseth is ready to finish the job.
Carried out a new wave of strikes in Iran. The Pentagon confirming to Fox that U.S. forces struck 4 Iranian drones posing a threat to the Strait. CENTCOM also bombing an Iranian military site that was seconds away from launching a 5th drone. We're told these strikes were purely defensive and intended to maintain the ceasefire, quote unquote. This comes just after the president called a high-stakes cabinet meeting at the White House today. The main topic, Iran.
Well, I think we're doing very well. I think they're starting to give us the things that they have to give us. And if they do, that's great. And if they won't, then the man on my left is going to finish them off.
The man on his left, Pistol Pete.
We're going to use maximum lethality, and we're going to bring them to their knees. And so whether it's their Navy that's at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, their Air Force, their air defenses, or their defense industrial base, they may have missiles, but they can't build more right now. And they can't build more drones right now. And they can't build more ships.
Nope. And they won't be able to. Trump's not going to let them. So what this really means is that President Trump has compressed the entire Iran file into one brutally effective formula. Comply or get weaker by the hour. The deal is still active, but only because the Trump administration is proving every single day that violations will be punished immediately. Iran cannot enrich uranium, threaten the Strait, launch drones, and expect endless Western concessions like it got during previous administration. Those days are over. Trump is showing the region that our allies and our enemies that the United States will protect navigation, crush provocations, and still leave the door open for a serious agreement. That's not mixed messaging. That's leverage. And that is how you negotiate when America is led by a commander-in-chief who actually believes in American power. So here's the bottom line tonight. President Trump's doing exactly what strong leadership looks like. He's pursuing a historic agreement with Iran, but he's doing it from a position of dominance, not desperation. The administration has made the terms very clear. Turn over the highly enriched uranium, keep the Strait of Hormuz open, and stop testing the United States. If Iran wants a deal, there is a path. If Iran wants to keep playing games, the Trump administration has already shown it's fully prepared to finish the job. And that's why the panic is not in Washington this time. The panic's in Tehran. If you agree that peace through strength beats weakness every single time, share this report and subscribe to the Next News Network. Drop your answer in the comments, yes or no. Should President Trump give Iran any more time, or has the moment come to force total compliance now? I want to hear from you. Let's have a conversation in the comments. But make sure you text those words, raw feed, to the number on the screen, 844-840-4963. That's how you get the secret messages from me to your phone. And celebrate America 250 with us at the merch shelf just below this video. All right, moving right along. That is the Iran update. And now we got to give you the latest news on what's going on with Jill Biden. She made some remarks that are causing quite a stir, only confirming what we knew the whole time. Oh, yeah. Yep, the cat is out of the bag. So we're going to move into this as long as Brian is ready to take us into our next report. Tonight, the real Biden story is not a staircase, not a bicycle, not another awkward clip the corporate press once brushed aside. The bombshell is this. Former First Lady Jill Biden now admits she thought that Joe Biden might have been having a stroke during that catastrophic 2024 debate with President Trump, so think about that. If she feared a medical emergency in real time, why did the American people get a smiling performance afterward, telling them that he did a great job and was ready for 4 more years? See, that's not a side story. That is the story. And it opens a question that Democrats do not want answered. Because once that admission's on the table, every denial from the former Biden inner circle gets dragged right back into the light. For years, Americans watched the stumbles, the stage falls, the bike crash, the vacant moments, the wandering episodes, the confusion, and the unforgettable debate where President Trump looked over and said what millions are thinking. He didn't know what Biden just said. And Biden probably didn't know either. Yet the media machine, the party operatives, and family members kept insisting that nothing was wrong. And that is why this matters. The issue is no longer whether Joe Biden was declining when he was president. Most of the country settled that a long time ago. The issue is trust. Who knew? When did they know it? And why were voters told the exact opposite during one of the most important elections in modern history? If Jill Biden privately feared a stroke but publicly sold strength, the Americans were not merely misinformed. They may have been deliberately deceived by a political class determined to hold power at any cost. And while we're talking about what Washington and the media refuse to level with the public about, there's another breaking story Americans should see through a national security lens. This breaking news in America's critical mineral supply chain, the SAGA metal story, just got a whole lot stronger. Less than 48 hours ago, they released new information suggesting that its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the entire planet. Now look at your screen, SAGA Metals. They're trading as SAGMF in the United States and SAGA in Canada. Now that matters because vanadium and titanium are strategic materials tied directly to defense, infrastructure, and industrial strength. Now to understand the scale, you need to compare radar to China's Panzinhua deposit. That is a state-linked system, and it's valued in the multi-billion-dollar range and responsible for over 40% of global vanadium. Check the exclusive briefing. It's linked below, but it's only for Next News viewers. And check out the in-depth interview I did with the CEO on this very topic just a few weekends ago. Now back to the cover-up question that Democrats and their media allies still cannot explain away. See, here's the part that changes everything. This is no longer about whether people on the internet made jokes about Biden clips. It's about whether those clips were early warnings that the public recognized while the people closest to him were managing the optics. Jill Biden's own words just reopened that entire timeline. If she was frightened enough to think stroke, then every reassurance after that debate becomes suspect. And when you line that up with the old stair falls, the stage tumble, the wandering, the confusion, the pattern becomes impossible to dismiss. So let's take a look at some of these receipts. Here's one. This debate moment and Trump's reaction. Who will ever forget this?
the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it.
Absolutely brutal. That's just one of them. Wasn't a one-off glitch. No, Biden struggling. Remember this moment? Biden struggling up the stairs. Another moment in American history that the Biden administration wishes to just go away. Time that tragic moment showing the weakness of our president. So it wasn't just the plane stairs. He fell up plane stairs multiple times, fell on stage at a military ceremony, fell off a bike, had to be led off stage by an ex-president holding his wrist, wandering into the rainforest, calling out the name of dead people. He put on a Trump hat, looked like a deer in headlights. And Jill wants you to know she never noticed anything was off. So here's the former First Lady.
Horrified as you saw it unfold?
I wasn't horrified, I was frightened because I had never, ever seen Joe like that.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
Before or since? Never.
Or since?
Yes. Or
You've
since.
never seen him like
Never.
that?
No.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Why?
And here's where the cover gets uglier. After previously fearing a stroke, she went on stage, told the country he did a great job. Yeah.
I can't thank you all enough for staying and for being here and for all your support. Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Why? Yes. So, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yep. So, what this really means is simple. The defining scandal may not be Joe Biden's decline itself, but the machine that was built around hiding it. The former Biden White House party handlers, legacy media figures, and even family members all had a choice. Protect the country with honesty or protect their power with spin. And what do they choose? They chose spin. And that's why the phrase elder abuse keeps surfacing. Not as a punchline, but as an accusation. Because if the people closest to him saw obvious warning signs and still pushed him forward, then Joe Biden was not being safeguarded. He was being used. And the American people were expected to ignore their own eyes while President Trump was telling the truth in plain English on that debate stage for the entire nation to see. So the lesson here is really bigger than a man or a party meltdown. It's about whether the American people can trust the people who demand power over them. During the previous administration, citizens watched clip after clip and were told not to believe what they saw. Then came the debate with President Trump, and the mask slipped in front of the entire country. Now Jill Biden's own admission blows a hole straight through the old talking points. If she thought it might be a stroke, then the praise, the spin, and the push for 4 more years look a lot less like confidence and a lot more like a calculated deception. The good news is this: that era is over. President Trump's back in the White House, America is back under strong leadership, and the media gatekeepers do not control the facts the way they used to. If you want accountability, share this video. Subscribe, comment below, and yes or no, do you believe the American public was intentionally misled about Joe Biden's condition? And make sure you text the words raw feed to that number on the screen, 844-840-4963. That's how you get text messages direct from me to you when the notifications fail you. And here's one thing. I want to celebrate America 250 with you. So check out the merch shop below this video, and let's celebrate together. Jill Biden. That I did not see coming. But she's safely far enough away from the presidency now that she can certainly make those statements because the accountability is over. The auto pen was rolling, that's right. Has the president signed an agreement with Iran yet? No, he has not. All right, let's move right along here. Dragged him around the world like a sideshow as her and those Clintons and Obamas gave orders. That's exactly what it was. All right. Big shout out to everybody watching over on our new streaming partner, Trump Daily Post, as well as on our own X account at Next News, and people watching on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure you follow us on all platforms so you get the latest information as it becomes available. I'm a White House credentialed reporter, and I'm honored to be one of the first of the class entering into the White House when President Trump opened it up to people like myself to bring you the real news. And that's what we do here at the Next News Network. Tonight, the anti-weaponization fraud is exploding into the next greater political war of the Trump era. And that should tell you one thing immediately. President Trump hit a nerve. What began with the illegal leak of Trump's tax returns has now become something much bigger. A formal path for Americans targeted by the former Biden-Garland DOJ to seek apologies, accountability, and even compensation. And now the judges, the media, Sacramento radicals, and even some Republicans are panicking. Why? Because this fund does not just move money, it does something Washington fears even more. It officially recognizes that government abuse happened. This is the real fight, and the establishment wants you looking somewhere else. They want this framed as a dispute over procedure or a spat over January 6th or just another Trump controversy. No. The Trump administration is advancing a completely different idea. If citizens were targeted by a weaponized government, then the government should not just shrug and walk away. It should pay. And that changes everything. According to the RNC briefing memo that I received, this new DOJ anti-weaponization fund is opened to Americans who are harmed by political lawfare, including Christians, pro-life activists, veterans, conservative influencers, and senior citizens. Vice President J.D. Vance made the point very clear. Republicans can apply and Democrats can apply. This is not supposed to be a partisan prize. It's restitution. And that is why institutional Washington is lashing out, because once you admit that there were victims, you're one step away from admitting that there were abusers. And that's the part the permanent ruling class cannot afford to concede. Now, before we go further, there's another breaking story tonight tied directly to American strength and national security. This breaking news on America's critical mineral supply chain, the SAGA metal story, just got stronger. Less than 48 hours ago, they released new information suggesting its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the entire planet. Now, SAGA Metals is trading as SAGMF in the U.S. and SAGA in Canada. To understand the scale, you must compare the radar project to China's Panzinhua deposit. It's a state-linked system valued in the multi-billion-dollar range and responsible for over 40% of global vanadium supply. And that's why this matters now. See, America cannot afford dependence on hostile supply chains for strategic materials. Check the exclusive briefing link below, but it's only for Next News viewers. It's down in the description. And check out the in-depth interview with the CEO I did on this topic just last weekend. Now back to the story that has Washington in panic mode. See, here's the twist they don't want discussed. The backlash itself is proving Trump's point. Gavin Newsom's talking about taxing recipients at 100%. Former judges are demanding court intervention. Senate Republicans are getting hit by the base for dragging their feet, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended President Trump by saying no American should be targeted for political reasons. Exactly. If this fund were meaningless, the system would ignore it. Instead, the system is trying to kill it before the public fully understands what it represents. And once you see that, the whole fight looks very different. So the DOJ Weaponization Fund gives Americans targeted by the Biden-Garland DOJ a path to seek formal apology, accountability, and compensation. It's open to anyone. You go to my X account, you can see this infographic we've prepared for you. The Trump administration announced this anti-weaponization fund, offering Americans allegedly targeted by the Biden administration a chance to receive a formal apology and proper compensation. President Trump's restoring justice and holding a weaponized bureaucracy accountable. Supporters say the fund is meant to address political lawfare and government abuse. The groups named Christians, pro-life activists, veterans, conservative influencers, and even senior citizens. Open to anyone. Republicans can apply for it. Democrats can also apply for it. So it's not limited to just Trump supporters. So every conspiracy theory about January 6th and the FBI has come true. Inspector General of the United States Department of Justice Michael Horowitz testified on Capitol Hill, did not deny that there were FBI informants in the crowd.
Horowitz testified on Capitol Hill today and did not deny that there was FBI informants in the crowd on J6. The hearing was supposed to focus on how the FBI used its security clearance adjudication process to purge its ranks of whistleblowers and conservatives and punish anybody who didn't have aligning views with the FBI leadership. When pressed on how many were there and if it was more than 100, he said, "I'm not in a position to say that, both because it's in draft form and we have not gone through the classification review, and so I need to be careful." And then when he was asked on how many confidential human sources were reimbursed for travel, he said, "As I sit here, I don't recall the number." So as he said before, this whole report is still being drafted, and he was asked if the report will have the number of people, confidential human sources that were in the crowd at the time, and he said that the report will have that in that regard, but it won't be released until after the election. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. There is no misinformation going on right now. I will leave the link below to the article so you guys can read it all yourselves.
Horowitz wouldn't give straight answers on how many FBI human sources were there, who got travel money. Now Jim Jordan zeroing in on an even darker question, whether some of those operatives were also getting paid by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So you can pretty much guarantee there's going to be quite a few people who were affected on January 6th that are going to be applying for this fund. Jim Jordan announces that the human sources who infiltrated January 6th might have been paid by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
We also sent a subpoena yesterday for documents dealing with this fraud. They called he's committed to come. We also sent a subpoena yesterday for documents dealing with this fraud. They called these guys field sources. Here's a key question I have too. Were any of the guys they were paying, was the Biden Justice Department paying these same guys confidential human sources? We know 26 confidential human sources were at the Capitol on January 6th. 4 went in the Capitol. They weren't authorized to do so. I want to know if any of these guys were double dipping and taking money from the government and from the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's one of the things we want to find out.
That would be another new chapter if true and if proven. Sir, thank you for your
Another new chapter about to open up, especially with respect to this weaponization fund. Follow money, find out who was paying these confidential human sources. Now, Congressman Mike Flood already demanding oversight and drawing a hard line over who should get anything from this fund. A Republican from Nebraska said at a town hall he doesn't want any money from the Justice Department's fund going to anybody who physically assaulted police officers on the Capitol, at the Capitol on January 6th.
think one penny of any fund should ever go to any January 6th insurrectionist that was in the Capitol on January 6, 2021. I want to be very clear. I do not think we should be creating a fund for people that commit physical violence against law enforcement. Here's what I would say. As I understand it, and this comes from some of my colleagues in the Senate is opening an oversight effort, and we in the House have to determine whether we do the same in the Judiciary Committee or in the Oversight Committee. I clearly think Congress needs to have an oversight role in this before I can sign off or support this. But listen, this is less than a week old, so I am going to be back in Washington on Tuesday. I will say this, though. I do not want $1 of that going to anybody who physically assaulted police officers, period.
Despite the facts that January 6th was a complete setup and a hoax, so he wants Congress looking over the fund before he signs on to it. Now Tom Fitton makes the bigger argument. Trump gave his own payout so victims of government abuse could be compensated instead. Last week, the Justice Department announced a new $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund as part of the settlement of President Trump's lawsuit over the illegal leak of his tax returns. He did something rare in Washington. He walked away from potentially billions in direct damages for himself and his company. So the federal government would instead set up a process to compensate Americans abused by that same government. That's the truth behind this fund, and it's why so many of Trump's political opponents and critics are lining up against it. Trump chose transparency instead of payout, and its critics hate it. So the point is simple. Trump could have cashed in, but he chose to redirect the money towards Americans targeted by the state. That move is now setting off a civil war in the GOP, with John Thune and Mitch McConnell facing MAGA fury for trying to choke the fund off. Thune is facing MAGA fury, some calls to be primaried after failing to deliver ICE CBP funding and letting the Save America Act stall. Listen to this.
Inside his own party, Senate Republicans left town without voting on a bill to fully fund ICE and border protection after pushing back on the president's anti-weaponization compensation fund. Now we have Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram with more clarity on all of this for us from Capitol Hill.
Republicans revolted about the weaponization fund.
I think a lot of people are troubled by it. Nobody knew anything about it. We learned about it in the press.
Democrats and many Republicans plan to kill the fund with Senate amendments.
Maybe this is the one that will finally have them saying publicly that this is a corrupt action at its heart.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune said the White House should have consulted Congress about the anti-weaponization effort, but presidential allies defended the fund.
Every single Republican who was on the ballot, like I was in the 24 cycle, talked about stopping the weaponization of government.
President Trump says, quote, I gave up a lot of money allowing the anti-weaponization fund to go forward. Former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said it would be, quote, utterly stupid, morally wrong to award money to pardon January 6th rioters. Some conservatives are angry that Senate GOP leaders pulled the plug.
It's pretty gutless on the Senate's part to what they did, and their leadership needs to be called out for it.
They need to do a factory reset at the Senate. It's absurd what they're doing.
ICE and Border Patrol lack funding yet again.
My main concern is that we actually have those interior, ICE enforcement functions funded, right?
So while Senate leadership and the usual rhinos move to undermine Trump's anti-weaponization push, the swamp's legal class is piling up too. We have this from the New York Post. Dozens of former judges call on court to probe Trump's anti-weaponization fund. First, the GOP balks, then retired judges jump in. The same playbook, the same panic at the White House. Treasury Secretary Bessent is asked how the fund actually moves forward. It makes clear why the fight exists in the first place.
The IRS
People talking about the IRS settlement, and which has been rolled over now into this weaponization fund over at DOJ. Wanted to get your comment on the decision process, as much as you can tell, how that settlement came to be, how it was rolled over to DOJ, and then the process for those funds now as it's played out.
Good. So thank you for the question. This is going to be the only question I'll take on this matter today. So there's ongoing litigation, so it'd be inappropriate for me to comment. President Trump is a great American who has endured more than 10 years of nonstop harassment and weaponization from the federal and state government actors. A bad actor at the IRS leaked more than 400,000 tax returns, including the Trump family, all the employees, and that's how we got here now. No American should be targeted for political reasons, and every citizen deserves fair treatment and full protection of the law. The Department of Justice represented Treasury and the IRS in this matter, and I'm going to have to refer any questions to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. So
there's the Treasury Secretary weighing in at the press briefing today, framing it plainly. Trump endured years of nonstop weaponization. The administration says no American should be targeted that way. And then a reporter brings up Gavin Newsom's answer from the left.
Gavin Newsom has floated this idea of a 100% state tax on Californians who receive money from President Trump's anti-weaponization fund. Your response to the governor's call for 100% tax?
There's no cure for stupid.
No cure for stupid. And here is Stupid himself.
That slush fund that you mentioned, are you looking to take any action on it? Is there anything you can do about that?
Well, I've been thinking a lot. I'm not in Congress. I was out there in Washington, D.C., trying to make a case anew. And some good meetings with EPA. Lee Zeldin's, I want to get him fired. But his team's working hard to see what we can do to help the victims of last year's fires in Los Angeles. And, so I was up there around the time when legislative leaders were all, discussing what the options were. And so I've been thinking a lot about it in my flight back. And one thing that I think we're going to try to do with your support is tax 100%. Anyone from California that receives any of those funds, we want to tax 100% of those proceeds. And that's an action the state of California can take. It's an action we look forward to taking.
You can't fix stupid. Certainly can't. So what this really means is that the anti-weaponization fund is becoming the financial manifestation of the entire America First indictment of the previous administration and the permanent bureaucracy. Russian collusion hoaxes, censorship pressure, IRS abuse, selective prosecution, debanking, federal intimidation. All of it now points to one question. Do victims get justice, or does the machine protect itself again? That's why the January 6th human source issue matters here too. Michael Horowitz was pressured and pressed and did not deny FBI informants were in the crowd. Jim Jordan asking whether some confidential human sources were even getting paid by the Southern Poverty Law Center on top of government money. If those facts keep expanding, then the demand for compensation and accountability only gets stronger and not weaker. So let's be very clear here. President Trump did something almost unheard of in this town. According to allies defending the settlement, he gave up the chance to pursue a massive personal payout and instead helped create a mechanism that could compensate Americans who say they were abused by their own government. And that's not selfish. That's leadership. And of course the left hates it. Of course the establishment media hates it. And yes, Congress should make sure that violent offenders don't get rewarded. Even Flood is right to draw that line. But what if that whole thing was manufactured to begin with? See, it doesn't erase the bigger truth. The real scandal is not the fund. The real scandal is the weaponization that made the fund necessary in the first place. If the Trump administration succeeds here, Washington may finally be facing consequences for what it did to the American people. So share this video, subscribe to the Next News Network, and let me know in the comments, should victims of government lawfare be compensated? Yes or no? Make sure you text the words raw feed to that number on the screen, 844-840-4963. That's how you get direct messages from me to you when it matters most. And I want you to celebrate America 250 with me. You can do that by checking out the merch shelf below this video. All right, moving right along. I'm going to talk about what's going on with Tulsi Gabbard. The CIA is panicking as Gabbard's JFK file push rocks the deep state. As you know, she is going to be leaving us next month from her position. I had a brief opportunity to meet her at Ron Paul's 90th birthday. That was last year. I happened to be the only person in the hallway when she walked in, and I was able to greet her and welcome her to the event. So I got a picture with her. Lovely lady. She's been doing some amazing work, and of course she is the deep state's greatest threat. And so I wonder who they're going to replace her with. That I don't know. But Tulsi Gabbard's been doing a bang-up job, and she's supposedly going to be bringing out some more files right before she leaves. So it's kind of like lighting a match and throwing it over her shoulder and just walking away like an action hero as the whole thing burns behind you. So let's jump into this, shall we, Brian? Right now, this story is no longer about Tulsi Gabbard stepping down. It's about what she may have uncovered before leaving office and who inside the permanent bureaucracy may be scrambling to keep it buried. We're talking about alleged fights over JFK files, MK Ultra records, Ukraine money trails, and criminal referrals tied directly to the Obama-era Russia hoax. At the same time, the CIA is being hit with a separate scandal involving 308 gold bars and millions in cash. You can feel it now. This is a race between disclosure and containment. The question is simple. What were they so afraid that Tulsi would release? But I'll tell you why this matters. Because under President Trump, the American people were promised real transparency. Not the fake transparency that Washington always offers right before another document dump gets delayed, redacted, or buried. Tulsi Gabbard became one of the central figures in that push. She publicly said evidence pointed to former President Barack Obama leading the manufacturing of intelligence tied to the Russia collusion hoax, and she referred the documents to the DOJ and FBI for criminal investigation. More than 300 days later, according to the source material, no indictment has followed. Now add the allegation that the CIA moved on her office while she was reportedly declassifying records tied to JFK and MK Ultra. If true, that's not a paperwork dispute. That is the intelligence apparatus acting like it can outrank the elected commander-in-chief. And then there's the Ukraine angle. Documents allegedly sitting at OMB that could show whether U.S. money was redirected into the former Biden campaign orbit in 2024. See, these are not side issues. These are legitimacy fights over who really runs this government. Speaking of national security, there's a parallel story Americans should be paying very close attention to right now. This breaking news on America's critical mineral supply chain, the SAGA metal story, just got stronger. Less than 48 hours ago, SAGA released new information suggesting its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the entire planet. You see, SAGA Metals is trading as SAGMF in the U.S. and SAGA in Canada. It's right there on your screen. But to understand the scale, you need to compare the radar project to China's Panzinhua deposit. That's the Chinese state-linked system. It's valued in the multi-billion-dollar range. It's also responsible for over 40% of global vanadium output. And that's why SAGA is challenging them head-on with this new project of theirs. See, in an America First era, strategic mineral independence matters. So if you want the deeper breakdown, check the in-depth interview that I did with the CEO on this very topic just a few weekends ago. Check the exclusive briefing. It is linked below, but it's only for Next News viewers down in the description. Because whether it's hidden files or critical minerals, the real fight is the same. Who controls America's future? Now back to Tulsi, because here is the twist that takes this from interesting to explosive. The stories surrounding her are no longer isolated headlines. They're starting to merge into the public mind into one giant question mark over the whole intelligence community. surveillance allegations, declassification battles, Russia hoax referrals, Ukraine funding claims, and suddenly a senior CIA figure allegedly sitting on a mountain of gold bars. That's when people stop saying, "What a weird coincidence," and start asking, what exactly has this agency been doing all these years? So we've been tracking this story about the CIA raiding Tulsi Gabbard's office to seize documents. She was reportedly in the middle of declassifying MK Ultra. Here is the report on that.
Raided Tulsi Gabbard's office. Agents hauled out dozens of boxes, files on the JFK assassination and MK Ultra, the CIA mind control operation, which she was in the process of declassifying. Today's whistleblower said it during his deposition, and Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna confirmed it moments ago.
The reason why this is troubling is, A, there was an executive order that the president had directed the full declassification of JFK, but then also to the MK Ultra files. The CIA famously has said that, all documents were released and other documents had been destroyed. So these are allegedly those documents that apparently never existed.
Can the CIA overrule the president? No.
No. Very simple answer. So if the CIA really moved to stop Tulsi on JFK and MK Ultra, it tells you exactly how scared the intel machine really is. Now we move to what she's already put on the table, a criminal referral tied to Obama and the Russia hoax, with the DOJ still sitting on his hand. It's sad to see Tulsi having to resign to care for her husband. Let's not forget, it's now been 303 days since National Security Director Gabbard referred Barack Obama to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. And the DOJ refuses to do anything. Remember this?
Go ahead. Thank you. And Director Gabbard, this one is for you. Do you believe that any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former President Obama?
Correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment. There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact.
Ed, go ahead.
Director Gabbard, thank you. So just two questions, but to begin on that. The president yesterday, you've inferred that the former president helped lead a coup. Based on what you now see, do you believe President Obama is guilty of treason?
I'm leaving the criminal charges to the Department of Justice. I'm not an attorney, but as I've said previously, when you look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments that were created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and a treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration.
A treasonous conspiracy. So she didn't just point the finger at Obama. She laid out evidence calling it a treasonous conspiracy against Trump. But now the mood shifts as she's pressed another secret the feds have kept locked down for years, UFOs and aliens.
Keep you, but there's so much to ask you. UFOs. There's been a lot of...
My husband is in the corner, for the record, pumping his fist right now that you're asking this question.
So, is there anything... We've had some declassification of some very strange videos that look like they are, unidentified flying objects. Is there anything in the files that you think you could find or you have found?
Nothing that I'm prepared to talk about today.
Ooh. So watch this space.
Say what?
Watch this space.
We are I'm just going to say this. We're continuing to look for the truth and share that truth with the American people.
The truth is out there.
Yes, it is.
So do you believe that there could be aliens?
I honestly, like, my personal belief. I have my own views and opinions.
Right.
In this role, I got to be careful with what I share.
Very interesting.
I'm laughing. My husband's laughing in the corner because we have these same conversations. And obviously I don't share any classified information outside of my building with those who have clearances, but this is fun that he's here to watch this right now.
So even when Tulsi gets asked about UFOs, you can hear the same message. There are still truths American people have not been given. And now we have this. The former CIA officer accused of stealing 308 gold bars worth over $40 million. Accused of using cash for operations he was in charge of to buy gold bars instead of spending the money on informants or other secret expenses. He used the money to buy untraceable assets that he hid in his home.
Our CIA senior officer is accused of secretly stashing 300 gold bars in his house that he brushed off as work-related expenses, according to court documents, and two people familiar with his employment history. Julia Ainsley is joining us now at this exclusive reporting. Sorry, Julia. What?
I know. Hallie, when I first heard this tip, I didn't think it was real. And then the court documents spelled out that there was a man who was an employee of a government agency that was found with $40 million worth of gold bars in his home. If you're wondering how many gold bars that is, the court document says it's about 308. What my team here at NBC News, Dan DeLuce and Gary Grumbach and I found is that that man was not just an employee of any agency. He was a high-level official with top secret clearance in the CIA, and that he not only lied about what he was doing with this money, but that allegedly he also lied about his background, said that he graduated from a college he did not attend, that he went to a graduate school he did not attend, and that he had a pilot's license that the FAA said he did not have. So he was arrested last week, and he is now in detention facing these charges of lying about his background and perhaps knowingly embezzling American taxpayers' money. I want to read you a statement we just got in from the CIA saying that after a CIA internal investigation identified potential violations of the law, CIA Director John Ratcliffe referred the information to the FBI for a law enforcement investigation. The FBI is working closely with our partners at the CIA and the Department of Justice as we continue to investigate this matter fully. So, Hallie, we will be staying on this, but what this looks like is that this was someone who was given currency. He was even paid in cash and watches that he said needed to be used in order to pay for operations that he was in charge of. But rather than keeping it in his office, they found $40 million worth of this gold, as well as $2 million in cash and 35 luxury watches in his home. So
how's that for the CIA, huh? Now ask yourself how deep the rot goes. John Solomon says Tulsi needs one specific batch of OMB documents that could point to Ukraine money being funneled back to the Biden campaign. Listen to this.
There's a tranche of documents that Tulsi Gabbard needs from OMB. If you listen in Russ Vote, pay attention to this. This is important. There is concern that Ukraine was involved in a 2024 scheme to take a large federal grant that was given to Ukraine and launder it back to the Biden 2024 campaign. We're not talking about Hunter Biden grift in 2014. We're talking contemporaneously in 2024. The evidence of whether that occurred or not sits in OMB's files because OMB is currently running the U.S. Agency for International Development. If she can get those documents, she could make a criminal referral to the FBI. Thus far, she doesn't have those documents, so I hope Russ Vote jumps into action pretty quickly.
Remember Act Blue? How did they get all that money? So the fight's not just over old intel secrets. It's about whether Tulsi can get records for a fresh criminal referral tied to Biden world money. And now we circle back to the gold bars with new details on the cash Rolexes. CIA senior manager David Rush got nailed by the FBI with 308 gold bars, with over $40 million hidden in his Virginia home, $2 million in cash, dozens of Rolexes. Requested massive ops funds, physical gold for covert work, then converted it straight into untraceable assets instead of paying informants. Internal CIA audit flagged it. Ratcliffe sent it to the FBI. He's now accused of faking degrees from Clemson and Rensselaer, plus phony Navy Reserve Service to pocket extra pay. For one guy, one house, 4 decades of trust us agency oversight. Unbelievable. New York Post. Former CIA official arrested after feds find $40 million worth of gold bars stashed in his home. So this is the real meaning of the moment. Tulsi Gabbard's departure created a deadline, and deadlines create panic inside institutions that survive on delay. If she was moving to declassify material on JFK, MK Ultra, UAPs, Russia collusion, or Biden-era conduct, then every unreleased file becomes a threat to the old Washington order. And the CIA gold bar scandal lands like gasoline on that fire because average Americans don't need an intelligence seminar to understand 308 gold bars hidden in a house. They understand corruption. They understand double standards. They understand a system that tells them to trust the experts while insiders allegedly loot, lie, and obstruct. That's why the story is growing. It's not just about Tulsi. It's about whether the deep state can still hide behind secrecy in President Trump's second term. The American people have been patient for far too long. They watched the former Biden administration weaponize institutions. They watched the Russia hoax push for years. And now they're watching a new battle over declassification unfold under President Trump's watch. The good news is this White House was elected to break the old system, not to protect it. If there are files on JFK, MK Ultra, Ukraine funding, or intelligence abuse, release them. If there was obstruction, expose it. If crimes were committed, prosecute them. No more games. No more magical delays. No more treating the intelligence class like a separate branch of government. If you agree that the truth must come out, share this report everywhere. Comment below and tell me what you think. They are the most desperate to hide. Make sure you subscribe to Next News for updates on this story. A simple yes or no. Do you believe the CIA is trying to stop full disclosure? And text the words raw feed to that secret number on the screen, 844-840-4963. That's how we bypass the algorithm and I get direct messages to you when it matters most. And I want to celebrate America 250 with you. So check out the merch shelf below this video and pick up something nice. And let's celebrate America this year. All right. Lots more news to get to. We're going to get to the Ivanka murder plot story. And then we've got the Cuba story, which is rapidly developing. It appears to be the next front in President Trump's MAGA doctrine. So first, let's get to this story on Ivanka and what's going on there. Brian's not ready. Okay. He's not ready. I'm jacked for the UFC at the White House. So am I. Looking forward to that. Raw feed doesn't work that good. At least it doesn't for me. What do you mean, Lynn? Did you text the words? Are you talking about the text message system? This story is bigger than a terror arrest. It's bigger than a blueprint and bigger than one threat posted online, because what just surfaced is something every American needs to understand. The war shadow that cast by President Trump's decision to take out Soleimani didn't end in 2020. According to reports now circulating, an Iran-linked suspect allegedly moved from revenge fantasy into operational planning against Ivanka Trump, even obtaining details tied to her Florida home. That means this was not random chatter. This was personal. If Iran's revenge networks are still active now, what else is still in motion? Now, we covered this last week, but the story is developing, so let's be clear about why this matters. President Trump made the courageous decision in his first term to eliminate Soleimani, one of the world's most dangerous terror masterminds. It was a show of American strength that the weak-kneed globalist class never had the courage to deliver. But Iran never forgot it, and 6 years later, the reporting suggests that revenge still sits at the center of this threat picture. New York Post reporting, echoed across these sources, says the suspect allegedly pledged to kill Ivanka Trump, obtained a blueprint of her home, and tied the threat directly to Soleimani. And that changes everything. See, this stops being an abstract foreign policy debate and becomes a direct attack on the family of the sitting president of the United States. At a moment when the Trump administration is dealing with Iran pressure, maritime flashpoints, drones, nuclear demands, this revelation lands like a thunderbolt. The message is ugly but unmistakable. America's enemies do not just hate our policies, they target the people who carry them out. And when we're talking about national security, there's another breaking development that Americans should not ignore. This breaking news on America's critical mineral supply chain. SAGA Metals just got even more important. Less than 48 hours ago, they released new information suggesting its radar project may be sitting on one of the largest titanium and vanadium systems on the planet. SAGA Metals is trading as SAGMF in the U.S. and SAGA in Canada. But to understand the scale, you must compare the radar project to China's Panzinhua deposit. That's a Chinese state-linked system. It's valued in the multi-billion-dollar range. It's also responsible for over 40% of global vanadium. And that's why this matters right now. If America is serious about supply chain independence, stories like this are huge. So check out the in-depth interview that I did with the CEO on this topic just a few weekends ago, and check the exclusive briefing linked below, but it's only for Next News viewers in the description. Now back to the terrifying revelation that just made the Iran story very personal for the First family. See, here's the part that should stop you cold. This was not just a threat against President Trump in the broad sense. According to the reporting, the target was his daughter, and the plot was allegedly tied to surveillance and revenge messaging. That's a whole different category of danger. And once a foreign-linked terror plot crosses that line, every current move involving Iran gets viewed through a very different lens. So as we pull up the posts and the reports, keep one question in mind. Was this an isolated plot or a warning about a larger revenge network that's still alive today? It's all over the news now. We reported it last week, but new details are surfacing. OK Magazine, her entire world has changed. Ivanka Trump has security everywhere after the frightening assassination plot was uncovered. So that tells you everything. She's under heavy protection. Fox News lays out the threat itself. This from Trump Daily Post. Iranian-trained terrorists plotted to assassinate President Trump's daughter, Ivanka. Here's the report developing from Fox.
It was allegedly in retaliation for the killing of Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani. Jillian Turner has more from the State Department. Hi, Jillian.
Good morning to you, Dana. Terrorists plotting to take out the President of the United States is a threat that we are all too tragically familiar with here in America, but terrorists plotting to take out the president's children is really a new horror, but it seems this is the world we are in, according to a court filing earlier this month. It turns out that an alleged terrorist from Iran's notorious security service had pledged to murder first daughter Ivanka Trump, and his plot was actually so advanced he had obtained a blueprint of her $24 million Florida home, according to the New York Post. He also posted a chilling threat on X that translates to, quote, "I say to the Americans, look at this picture and know that neither your palaces nor the Secret Service will protect you. We're currently in the stage of surveillance and analysis. I told you our revenge is a matter of time." Now, the suspect, Mohammed al-Sadi, is a 32-year-old Iraqi national. He now stands accused of taking part in as many as 20 different terror attacks on Americans. He was taken into FBI custody after agents identified his revenge plot. He was hoping to avenge the killing of Iranian military chief Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad, as you just mentioned, Dana, 6 years ago. Interestingly, or coincidentally, the president himself yesterday, we saw him all live on camera. He was ruminating about the threats to his life that he has faced so far.
Look, anybody in office, not only in this country, in other countries too, but when you are a consequential president, your life is in grave danger. I knew that.
It is also astonishing, Dana, when you realize that all of this went down as the Iranian regime has been trying to negotiate with President Trump. Right. Dana?
Right. That is a key detail. Thank you so much.
So it wasn't some vague online rant. Investigators say the suspect had Ivanka's home mapped out. Next, more on how authorities say the plot came together and why Trump's strike on Soleimani is at the center. New York Post revealing the terror plot targeted Ivanka. The suspect involved planned to assassinate as revenge for Soleimani.
Reports now of an Iranian revenge plot targeting President Trump's family. Sources have told the New York Post a terror suspect linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard was planning to kill the president's daughter, Ivanka. The suspect is accused of seeking revenge for the U.S. strike ordered by the president in his first term that killed top Iranian military officer Qasem Soleimani. That was back in 2020. Now, authorities arrested the suspect earlier this month. So we knew that this man had been picked up in Turkey. But now we are learning so much more. He allegedly pledged to kill Ivanka Trump. Prosecutors tell the Post he even had a blueprint of her home in Florida. Here's the president yesterday on the danger he and his family face.
It's a sad part of life. It's a dangerous business. What I'm doing is a dangerous business. They say if you're not consequential, you don't have so much problem. If you are consequential, you do.
I want to get your strategy thoughts about this, because whether it would be carried out or not, this threat is so real. We know what has been perpetrated against this current president.
Yeah, and thank God we got this one. I'm sure where there's one, there's more. But ultimately, I think what Americans need to take away from this, too, is that what Iran is trying to do inside our own borders to our president and his family is what Iran in general is trying to do to America as a nation. If they can't attack us directly, militarily, and have a chance of success, they're going to attack us indirectly through multiple different means. And that's just a reality of what the threat is to Iran. I mean, I've been dealing with this country, Iran, for half my life now or more, and it has always been recognized as a huge threat to our nation. And we've got a president now who's decided that it's time to stop letting them do what they're doing.
So, after the reporting on the suspect and the blueprint, the human toll comes into focus. Radar picks up on the aftermath with Ivanka described as deeply shaken. Ivanka Trump's assassination plot horror, the Don's daughter deeply shaken after frighteningly real scheme emerges weeks after White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. So what this really means is very simple. The consequences of Trump's America First strength are still echoing across the world because enemies of this country still fear him. Soleimani's elimination was not a mistake, it was justice, but justice against a terror regime comes with retaliation risk, and this alleged plot shows those risks did not disappear. They may have gone underground, and that's why the Trump administration's hard line on Iran is not just justified, it is necessary. If a regime or its proxies are still nurturing revenge fantasies against the president's family years later, then the threat environment is not theoretical, it is active. It is intimate. And what it confirms, what conservatives have said for years, weakness invites aggression, while strength exposes the enemy for exactly what it is. So at the end of the day, this is the real takeaway. When President Trump acts decisively, America's enemies react because they know he's not bluffing. And now, with reports that Ivanka Trump was allegedly targeted in a revenge plot tied to Soleimani, the cost of confronting evil has hit the Trump family in a deeply personal way. That should outrage every decent American. It should also harden this country's resolve. We don't back down because terrorists threaten our leaders or their children. We stand taller. We get smarter. And under President Trump, we make damn sure that America's enemies understand that there is a price for crossing that line. If you agree the Trump administration must stay relentless against Iran-linked terror networks, share this report everywhere. Comment below with one word: justice. And make sure you subscribe to Next News so the corporate media can't bury stories like this. And yes or no, should every Iran-linked threat against Trump's family be treated as an attack on America itself? I want to hear from you. And make sure you text those two words you see on the screen there. Text raw feed to 844-840-4963. That's how you bypass the algorithm. That's how you get direct messages from me to your phone when it matters most. And I want to celebrate America 250 with you. Check out the merch shelf below this video and let's celebrate together. Okay, moving right along here. I think we've got one more story for you guys this evening. Yes, the Cuba story. Let's talk about what's going on in Cuba, because that, I believe, is certainly going to be the next front. What's up, Pothead Kenny? God bless Trump and Gary Franchi. Yeppers! Oh, scumbag is gay. Can't be muzzy, just a wannabe. Oh, you guys. All right, Brian, I'm ready. Right now, the Cuban regime may have just said the quiet part out loud in its most ominous warning yet. Havana is now openly talking like a U.S. intervention under President Trump is no longer some distant fantasy, but a real possibility they feel forced to address in public. That alone should get every American's attention. Cuba's collapsing. The lights are going out, food is scarce, and the island sits just 90 miles from Florida. Then came the line that changed everything. The foreign minister warning of a bloodbath on both sides. Why would a regime say that unless it believes pressure from Trump is becoming very, very real? See, here's why this matters. Because for decades, Cuba was treated like a frozen relic of the Cold War, ugly, repressive, anti-American, but static. Not anymore. Under the Trump administration, the conversations moved from tired diplomatic theater to something far more serious: national security. Secretary Marco Rubio is making it clear that Cuba is not just a humanitarian story, it's a failed communist state parked beside key Gulf shipping lanes, near American energy infrastructure, and inside the immediate strategic orbit of the United States. Senator Rick Scott saying the same thing, warning that this regime is aligned with Russia, Communist China, Iran, and Hezbollah. That's not a minor nuisance. That is a threat sitting right off our coast, and after the pressure campaign that reshaped the regional chessboard in Venezuela, Havana clearly understands the rules may have changed. Blackouts, shortages, unrest, migration, all of it now looks less like business as usual and more like a regime entering its most dangerous phase in decades. And that's why the bloodbath line is not rhetoric, it's fear. And as we watch systems fail under corrupt regimes, it's also worth remembering how much damage can happen when people ignore real solutions that actually help the body recover and function better. Now, you've probably seen the clip of Joe Rogan with Mel Gibson talking about people close to them facing serious health struggles and then seeing dramatic turnarounds. Rogan mentions light-based therapies working at the cellular level. Gibson says it plain, the stuff works. And that hit home for me because I watched something very similar in my own house. My wife dealt with constant discomfort and anxiety for a long time, and when we started learning more, it changed how we looked at recovery, and that's why I want you to check out Red Light Therapy from Jonathan Otto at myredlight.com. If you've been curious, now is the time. Use NNN25 for individual items or NNN30 for bundles. Go to myredlight.com and see why so many people are finally paying attention. Now back to Cuba, because what the regime said next tells you this pressure campaign is hitting a nerve. See, this is the part the corporate media still does not want to say out loud. Whether or not any military option is imminent, Havana's behaving like the possibility has become credible under President Trump. See, that is the news. Add in reports that U.S. troops are in place to strike Cuba, and suddenly every regime official, every blackout, every protest takes on a very different meaning. Then layer on Treasury Secretary Bessent saying sanctions could go up or down depending on the regime's behavior. And you can see the squeeze is tightening from multiple directions at once. Now listen to this. Cuba Foreign Minister warns if Trump invades, there will be a bloodbath on both sides.
To send a message to the American people. I'm doing my best on this way, because whenever the American people has been informed on basis of a truthful and objective information, they act in the good way. They are in the right side of history.
And specifically,
He seemed interested in reaching young Americans because he says that if there is some kind of U.S. attack on Cuba, a military action of some kind, he used the word bloodbath. There will be a bloodbath on both sides. And he said that it would cost Americans, young Americans' lives if the Trump administration were to move to do this, Anna.
The Trump administration.
That was from MS Now. So Cuba's foreign minister isn't calming anything down, openly warning Trump about a bloodbath. Now Political reports the U.S. already has troops in place to strike Cuba. That's the headline on Politico. U.S. has the troops in place to attack Cuba. Pentagon puts the building blocks in place, so the threat gets a lot more serious. The military pieces are already on the board. Next, the bigger question, why Cuba matters so much to U.S. security. 90 miles off the Florida. Cuba is 90 miles off Florida, sits astride key shipping lanes for U.S. Gulf trade. Right now, the island is in free fall, economy collapsing. Here, check this out.
Cuba's current collapse become one of Donald Trump's most important geopolitical challenges in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba and the United States have shared a long and deeply strategic history. As early as 1818, the United States developed major trade relations with Cuba while the island was still under Spanish control. By 1823, the Monroe Doctrine made removing European influence from Cuba part of America's long-term strategic vision. The United States even offered to buy Cuba from Spain in 1854 for $130 million. Then, in 1898, America fought Spain in the Spanish-American War and took control of Cuba along with Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Cuba remained under U.S. military occupation until 1902, and Washington maintained deep influence over the island for decades afterward. That influence continued until Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959 transformed Cuba into a Soviet ally. Then came the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the moment the United States and Soviet Union came closer to nuclear war than at almost any other point in the Cold War. And the reason Cuba mattered so much was geography. The island sits only about 90 miles from Florida. The narrow maritime gap between Cuba and the Florida Keys became one of America's biggest strategic vulnerabilities because between 40% and half of U.S. waterborne trade connected to Gulf ports passes through nearby shipping lanes. If a hostile power ever blocked those routes with naval forces or mines, the economic impact on the United States could be massive. That is why American presidents, from James Monroe to John F. Kennedy, treated Cuba as a critical national security issue. And now Donald Trump appears to be following that same tradition. Trump's current strategy increasingly focuses on strengthening American influence across the Western Hemisphere while reducing long-term commitments in other regions. That is partly why Venezuela became so important. According to reports, when the United States removed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro earlier this year, Cuban troops were reportedly protecting him in Caracas. For years, Cuba depended heavily on Venezuelan oil shipments in exchange for intelligence and security support. But now that system is collapsing. Cuba is facing severe shortages of food, fuel, and electricity. Blackouts are spreading across the island while the economy continues deteriorating under sanctions, corruption, and decades of internal mismanagement. At the same time, Washington fears that a collapsing Cuba could become increasingly connected to criminal organizations, foreign intelligence networks, and hostile powers operating close to the American mainland. And this is where the story becomes larger than Cuba itself. Reports say the head of the CIA recently traveled to Cuba carrying a proposal involving roughly $100 million.
So you have a collapsing communist state sitting on America's doorstep along major trade routes. Now shift to the useful idiots on the left because Hassan Piker's Cuba trip is facing real scrutiny over whether it broke humanitarian trade rules. The claim: Hassan went to Cuba on humanitarian grounds. Truth: he likely violated the very restrictions that make humanitarian travel legal. Listen to this from Crowder.
Get to the first claim, and it's that Hassan was really there on humanitarian grounds.
Last month, I took the opportunity to go as part of a humanitarian mission to bring aid that my government won't. I'd be accompanying Progressive International alongside hundreds of others from around the world. Activists, journalists, artists, and politicians will be coming to the island by boat and plane to deliver over 40 tons of necessary supplies, food, medicine, and medical equipment.
Makes him look to be like such a great guy. He's going to go there and help some people and be fantastic. Well, here's the truth. Hassan and his group violated humanitarian restrictions. So he specifically said he went to expose what the United States government has done to the Cuban population. Watch him.
What's up, guys? I'm Hassan Piker. I'm here in Havana, Cuba, right now on a humanitarian aid mission alongside numerous other organizations, including but not limited to the DSA.
Democratic Socialists of America.
My goal here today is to bring awareness to what my government, the United States of America, has done to the Cuban population.
See, didn't make it up. Words came right out of his own mouth. So this case gets pretty easy to prove pretty quickly. We'll see if they can actually make the case or not. But each humanitarian traveler must engage in these kinds of activities that I'm going to list below, right?
And
only, exactly. So these are the rules and restrictions when you're going to a place like Cuba. A full-time schedule of activities that enhance contact with the Cuban people, support civil society in Cuba, or promote the Cuban people's independence from Cuban authorities. Do you think Hassan Piker did any of those things?
So, while the regime falls apart, left-wing influencers are running cover for it. Here's a blunt reality check after Cuba's foreign minister tried the usual script of lies, blames, and threats on U.S. television. This is peak communist behavior.
The Cuban foreign minister's first ever sit-down interview with Fox News. We wanted to talk to him now because the relationship is at this inflection point where the U.S. and Cuba could very well go to war in the near future. I had expected Bruno Rodriguez to ratchet down the temperature in this interview with the Trump administration, but he went in a different direction. Take a listen. Secretary Rubio made a video last week where he spoke to the Cuban people directly, and he said the real reason for your suffering right now is because the Cuban regime has plundered all of your country's resources.
En la calle se pregunta.
Well, people are in the streets wondering if the Secretary of State really knows what is going on in this world. In all areas, however, he lies. He lies on and on. He continuously intends to deceive the public opinion in the U.S., the U.S. Congress, and the international community.
The Cuban people in crisis now with nationwide blackouts, a food and fuel shortage, and a teetering economy. Military intervention by the U.S. right now, for many of them, would be a worst-case scenario. It almost sounds, Mr. Minister, like you feel some kind of military conflict between the U.S. and Cuba is inevitable. Is that the case?
¿Qué ganaría el pueblo estadounidense?
What would be the benefits for us taxpayers with a war near by its coasts? What would be the benefit for it to the national interest of the U.S.? I also appeal to the Congress of the United States in order to prevent what would be a catastrophic mistake that would cause a bloodbath and a real humanitarian catastrophe.
It was, Dana, very eye-opening to sit there and listen to him explain to me in great detail why the suffering of the Cuban people right now is entirely the Trump administration's fault. We've heard him say it before on social media, but hearing it, face to face was a different matter. Dana,
I bet. Yeah, it's Trump's fault, sure. So they're just going to blame America, threaten chaos, pretend communism didn't wreck the island, but Rick Scott cuts right through it, warning this anti-American regime is tied to Russia, China, and Hezbollah.
Scott has been calling for criminal charges against Cuba's aging former leader for some time now. In the meantime, a Tampa Democrat would like to see more lawmakers focused on kitchen table issues instead. The situation when it comes to Cuba, what does that mean for those who aren't Cuban Americans, especially in Tampa Bay?
Well, you're going to be safer. Right now, think about 90 miles off our coast, okay? You've got a regime that hates us, that are friends with Russia, Communist China, Hezbollah, Iran.
Senator Scott says that's why he supports an indictment against the 94-year-old former Cuban leader who he believes still has great influence in the Latin American country.
So Scott, making the national security case, it's not just a Cuba story, it's America First issue. Now Marco Rubio goes even harder, calling the regime what it is, incompetent communists.
Cuba's in a lot of trouble because, unfortunately for them, it's run by a bunch of incompetent communists. And being communist is bad, being an incompetent communist is like the worst. And but the country's been taken over by this company called Gaesa that basically controls 70% of the economy. None of the money in that company goes to help the Cuban people, none of it. So we'll be talking to them, we'll be working on it. You know, we want something good for the Cuban people, and hopefully there'll be a good outcome there for them. There needs to be. It's 90 miles from our shores, and having it a failed state 90 miles from our shores is a threat to the national security of the United States.
So Rubio says the Cuban people are trapped by a failed communist regime. Next, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent lays out the pressure campaign, saying sanctions can go up or down.
Mr. Secretary, how effective do you believe the current Treasury restrictions have been in pressuring the Cuban government? And also, if you're in the room when those talks are being held, are there any plans to either tighten the sanctions or to ease the sanctions against the Cuban government to get some type of change?
Again, that's going to be up to the Cuban government. That they can go up, they can go down. That we've tried to get humanitarian aid in, and the regime rejected it. So because they wanted to go through their corrupt system. So they could go up, they could go down. It's carrot and stick. Secretary Rubio doing a fantastic job of managing this process, and we at Treasury are working with him. So, in the red.
So the message from Treasury is simple: cooperate and relief as possible. Keep playing games and screws tight. And Rubio follows up, schooling the fake news.
Let me clarify something for you. Our sanctions are against a company named Gaesa. Yeah. Okay. This is a holding company set up by generals in Cuba that has generated billions of dollars of revenue, none of which benefits the Cuban people. Not 1 cent of it benefits the Cuban people. You understand this, right? I don't know if you know this. There's the Cuban government, and they have a budget, and then there's this private company that has more money than the government does. None of the money in that company goes to build a single road, a single bridge, provide a single grain of rice to a single Cuban, other than the people that are part of Gaesa. So that's what we're sanctioning, is a company that basically is taking anything that makes money in Cuba and illegally putting it into the pockets of a few regime insiders. So that's not sanctions on the Cuban people, because the Cuban people don't benefit from Gaesa. It's a sanction against this company that is stealing from the Cuban people to the benefit of a few. And we didn't discuss those sanctions yesterday, but we imposed them yesterday, and we're going to be doing more, by the way.
We're going to be doing more. And that crackdown may already be hitting home, because Hassan Piker is panicking after the Treasury subpoenas tied to aid for communist Cuba.
Hassan Piker might be in real trouble for visiting Cuba in March, where he filmed what looks like a propaganda video for the regime.
I'm here in Havana, Cuba, right now on a humanitarian aid mission. My goal here today is to bring awareness to what my government, the United States of America, has done to the Cuban population. One of the most ridiculous embargoes of all time that has only gotten more deadly as time has gone on.
Yeah, now federal officials have subpoenaed Piker as part of a wider investigation into violations of U.S. laws and sanctions, which prohibits supporting Cuba's communist regime. Piker responded today saying it's, quote, not great and BS and other things. This comes as the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier recently entered the Caribbean, and the DOJ indicted Raul Castro. Joining us now is senior editor of Investigation.
So we have carrier groups off the coast of Cuba now. Castro's been indicted. We've seen this play out before. And now where is Nicolas Maduro? So what does it all really mean? It means the Cuban regime is no longer posturing from a position of confidence. It's signaling vulnerability. Rubio has boxed the issue purposely. These sanctions target Gaesa, the regime's money machine, not the Cuban people. Bessent says the administration even tried humanitarian aid, and the communists rejected it unless it flowed through their corrupt pipeline. See, that exposes the lie. Havana does not fear American aggression nearly as much as it fears losing control. And And when a communist foreign minister starts publicly warning young Americans they could die in a bloodbath, that sounds less like strength and more like panic. The Trump administration has made one thing unmistakable. A hostile failed state 90 miles from our shores will not be ignored forever. So the takeaway is quite simple. Cuba is not just another foreign policy file collecting dust in some bureaucrat's drawer. Under President Trump, it's become a live America First security issue. A collapsing communist regime, hostile to the United States, tied to our enemies and positioned right off of Florida, is not something serious leaders can shrug off. And that's why Rubio and the administration are speaking so directly, and that is why Havana is suddenly sounding scared. The bloodbath warning was meant to intimidate Americans. Instead, it revealed that the regime believes that the old rules are over. Good. The Cuban people deserve freedom, not another generation of communist theft and misery. If you agree the Trump administration must keep maximum pressure on Havana, share this report and sound off in the comments, and make sure you subscribe to the Next News Network for the stories the legacy media refuses to tell you straight. Yes or no, should President Trump tighten the screws on Cuba even more? Let's have a conversation on this. And before you leave, text those 2 words to the number on the screen, raw feed, to 844-840-4963. That's how we bypass the algorithm and get you notifications when YouTube fails. And I want to celebrate America 250 with you. So why don't you pick out some gear below this video and support the work that we're doing here. All right, so where are we at now? I think that's a wrap, actually. 21,000, I'm going to take a picture of that. 21,357 people watching. Absolutely amazing. Make sure you follow us on all platforms. Next News on X. Follow us at the YouTube channel. We have over 2 million followers there. Follow us on Rumble. And a special shout out to our new streaming partner, Trump Daily Post. You guys do great work over there. Make sure you give them a follow as well. So it's been a fun night. We've covered a lot of ground. We covered the Trump accounts, the Trump $250 bill, the clock ticking in Iran, Jill Biden's slip of the tongue talking about the stroke weaponization fund, Tulsi Gabbard, the Ivanka murder plot in Cuba, and of course what happened in the last 24 hours at the White House. Because I am a White House correspondent. I'm your correspondent. I go to the White House for you. You send me, and I thank you for that. Thank you for your support, and I want you guys to have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow on the Next News Network.